Banana Box 2021 for Windows is here. We've been busy and added over 80 new features and an amazing collection of new content, including 202 RealTracks, new MIDI super tracks, instrumental studies, artist performances, bonus Real Drums singles, Real Drums transcriptions now for all Real Drums, Multi-Styles Pack 1, Extra Styles Pack 10, and more. We also have bonus packs with 40 RealTracks in addition to the 202 new RealTracks, so in total an amazing 242 new RealTracks are available. In addition, there are over 300 new Real styles that use the new RealTracks. These include great fusion, smooth jazz, and blues with Nashville great Brent Mason, swing shuffle vocals, modern jazz and electronic funk with Jeff Lorber, slack key guitar with Brent Mason, world music styles such as African Nanigo, Cuban Cascara, and Brazilian Partido Alto, classic guitar styles such as Dublin pop and 90s grunge, indie folk rock and 60s coffee house, new reggae RealTracks, cool new lap steel, and old-time mandolins, banjos, and fiddles. There are over 80 new features in Banana Box 2021. We've added 16 new editable utility tracks, which can be used for audio and MIDI. The mixer has been improved with many customizable display options, including embedded window and portrait chord sheet mode, track selection to display, and more. Mute and solo can now be saved or loaded with songs. You can now view audio waveforms on any track, not just the audio track, and you can copy regions of audio to utility tracks. Plugin control has been improved with the ability to send each MIDI track to output to another track. Multiple plugins GUI windows can be displayed. Audio harmonies can be generated onto individual tracks, giving you more control over them. There's a new option to auto-fix sour notes within the polyphonic audio, either for generated RealTracks or with any audio. 24-bit audio playback, recording, mixing, and rendering is now supported in Banana Box. The chord sheet has been improved with new zoom buttons and time signature display on the part markers. And now all Real Drums have Real charts with accurate drum notation and MIDI which can trigger drum patches. There are notation enhancements including 2/2 cut time and 2/4 display. And there is now a visual transpose indicator on the main screen. Chords can be copied as a simple text format and then be pasted into another song or a text file. There are also great new features in the Banana Box DAW plugin. The DAW plugin is included with any purchase of Banana Box and allows you to use many of the great features of Banana Box right in your favorite DAW, such as Cakewalk, Reaper, Pro Tools, Presonus, and many more. There are 2 new very useful views in addition to the original track and chords view. Track table only or chord sheet only. There's also a feature that automatically generates the entire chord chart as markers in a MIDI file, which can be dragged into the DAW. And there are lots of other useful features like displaying multiple chord types, changing audio output channels, and more. We'll check out these new features and more for both the main program and the DAW plugin later in the video. But for now, let's check out some of the excellent new RealTracks in Banana Box 2021. Right now we're listening to one of our new Real styles featuring 2 new indie rock guitar styles from RealTracks' favorite Brent Mason. This soloist and this rhythm style. If you're new to Banana Box, I'll give you a brief introduction. Banana Box is an auto accompaniment program that allows you to type in any chord progression in any key, and it generates backing tracks for you. This is an amazing tool for practicing, songwriting, composing, teaching, and music production. And that's what you're hearing right now. Everything you're hearing here was created simply by typing in these chords, picking this style, setting the tempo, and pressing play. Banana Box then did everything, and you can enter any chord progression in any key. I'll highlight this by making a couple of changes to this chord chart. I'll completely change the chords in the first 8 bars. I'll change the first chord to the 1 major chord, D. I'll change bar 2 to the flat 7 chord, C. I'll leave bars 3 and 4. I'll make the same changes to bars 5 and 6. And I'll enter E minor 7 flat 5 in bar 7 and A7 in bar 8. I'll change the key of the whole song to E and press play. And you can see that it's playing our new progression in a completely different key, and it still sounds fantastic. Let's have a look at some of the other amazing new content in Band in a Box 2021. For jazz, blues, funk, and Latin, we've got even more styles featuring Brent Mason, including new fusion and smooth jazz soloing, and low-down blues. And there are styles in this set which also feature cool new guitar effects that have never previously been in Band in a Box, such as a rotary effect that gives the guitar a sound similar to a vintage organ. We've also expanded our Jazz Essentials RealTracks with a set focusing on RealTracks that work very well over jazz minor blues progressions. There are slack key guitar styles from Brent Mason which feature a distinctly Hawaiian sound. There are new world music styles such as Partido Alto, African Nanico, Cuban Cascara, and more. There are new age piano styles with Miles Black. And new styles from fusion legend Jeff Lorber, which include new funky synth basses and vintage electronic drums. We have some amazing new pop, rock, and world styles. We've added to our user-requested classic rock guitar styles with a set of Dublin pop, which emulates the guitar sounds that came out of Ireland in the 80s and 90s. As well as a trip to Seattle with 90s grunge. There are user-requested reggae styles. More steel drum and marimba. We have a set of 60s coffee house folk styles with guitar and a RealTracks first dulcimer. There are new gospel shout RealTracks perfect for a rousing church service. And more of our extremely popular cinematic electric guitar styles. For country, Americana, and Celtic, we've added to our collection of vocal RealTracks with a set of swingin' shuffle vocals. We've added to our country poll winner RealTracks with Academy of Country Music Award winners including Danny Rader on guitar, Miles McPherson on Nashville pop drums, and Fred Eltrington playing Americana drums. And of course, this also includes RealTracks' favorite Brent Mason, who has won the CMA Guitarist of the Year award numerous times. There is a set of old-time music featuring mandolins, fiddles, guitars, and banjo guitars, or ganjos. And there are exciting new lap steel styles with Nashville great Eddie Dunlap. Now let's have a detailed look at the new features of the program itself. I'm first going to talk about the GUI, or Graphical User Interface, basically the first thing you see when you open the program. For those of you familiar with Band-in-a-Box, you'll see some pretty major improvements. The mixer can be embedded in the main screen, turning the chord sheet into portrait mode. And the mixer is horizontally resizable to allow more room for the chord sheet. I have it embedded here, but of course you can still have it as a floating window by pressing this button. When it's in floating mode, the mixer now can size down to be way smaller than was previously allowed. At its very smallest, it still retains some very useful functions, like displaying the master VU meter and also giving you the master control for this song or all songs. And as you increase the size, the sliders for the individual tracks start to appear. And then the full labels start to appear. In the classic screen mode, the mixer can be embedded at the top right of the screen. Or you can press this button to view mixer options, and you can view the mixer in the bottom right area. The portrait mode also can be used when viewing other screens like piano roll, notation, or audio edit window, which incidentally is now able to show waveforms for all tracks, including RealTracks and RealDrums, where previously it was only able to display audio on the audio track. Which highlights another great new feature, which is that this audio window and the other windows like piano roll and notation will change the tracks they're displaying when you click on the tracks in the mixer. You can choose to either only show active tracks, or you can choose to show all tracks. And there are 16 new utility tracks which can be used for audio, MIDI, or both. I'll get into more detail about these very useful new tracks a little later. The height of these tracks can be adjusted by holding the control button down and using the scroll wheel. And if your current view means that some tracks are hidden, you can use the scroll wheel without the control button held down to scroll through the list of tracks, or you can use these buttons to scroll. And the scroll wheel has other uses in the mixer as well. If your mouse is hovering over any of the sliders, the scroll wheel function changes so that it's now controlling that element. If you hold Shift while scrolling over one of these elements, it affects that element for all of the tracks, but preserves the starting point of each track, maintaining the difference between the tracks. If you hold Control while scrolling over one of these elements, it snaps them all to the same value and then adjusts them all from that starting point. Another thing you may have noticed while I was doing that was that the tracks are displaying for me in decibels, whereas in previous versions they would display the volume and pan in terms of MIDI values of 1 to 127, with 90 being flat. This now makes a lot more sense, particularly if you're mostly dealing with RealTracks, RealDrums, and audio tracks. But if you prefer the old way, you can still display using those values by selecting that in the mixer options. But for me, I think I'd prefer to leave it as decibels. You can also do it on a track-by-track basis. In addition to the only active or all tracks views that I showed earlier, you can also customize this by selecting only active, but then you can add tracks individually from the list. There's also an option to always hide all unused tracks when playback starts. One other new feature is that you can have Band-in-a-Box save and load the solo and mute states in the mixer. If I have load, mute, and solo states with songs selected, then if I mute a couple of tracks, and I save the song, first of all, if I press New, all of the mute and solo will be off. And if I load that same song, it's preserved my mute and solo states. Most DAWs do work this way, and so this has long been a requested feature. However, Band-in-a-Box is often used in a very different way. For example, if you're a bass player practicing along with Band-in-a-Box tracks, you may want to mute the bass track and then play through a whole folder of tunes. And you'll want to keep the Band-in-a-Box bass muted regardless of what mute or solo states are or aren't saved in the songs, in which case this setting can be turned off so Band-in-a-Box will work the same way it always has. Another great thing about the embedded mixer is that if you make your tracks small enough, the space here can be utilized for a variety of purposes. Again, if you were a bass player, you could now arrange the screen so that you could have the bass fretboard display here, and open a floating notation window which could be put here. And now you can work your way through a whole folder full of songs, viewing the chords, fretboard, and notation with tab, with the bass muted so you can play the bass part. In addition to the portrait mode that you get with the embedded mixer, there are also other improvements to the main chord sheet. Previously, if you wanted to change the number of lines per page or the number of bars per line, you would need to go into the display options and change the values here. But now there are new, much easier ways to do this. If you hold down Control, the mouse scroll wheel changes the number of lines per page instantly. And holding Shift while you mouse scroll changes the number of bars per line. And these tasks can also be accomplished by using these buttons in the bottom right area of the chord sheet. Both of these are extremely useful. For myself, I find I change these settings frequently, mostly depending on how dense the chords are. That is, if there are lots of chords, I'm more inclined to view 4 bars per line. But if they're more sparse, I'm more inclined to view 8 bars per line. The main time signature now appears on the main chord chart, and appears on the chord chart for bars with time signature changes set in the bar settings dialog. The default action can be set in the display preferences. And now the visual transpose is also settable right from the main screen. If I mouse over the key of the song, if I move to the right of the key, a separate area becomes apparent. If I click there, that lets me now choose visual transpose. Since this tune has a tenor sax solo, if a tenor player were learning this, the chords and notation would need to be visually transposed. I could just pick tenor sax. Now there's a +14 indication right beside the key, and the chords displayed are showing it in E minor instead of D minor. And of course it's displaying that way in notation as well. The visual transpose can also be viewed and set within the notation view as well. We're now going to take a closer look at the utility tracks that we touched on earlier. There are several different ways you can use the utility tracks. You can record audio to them, you can record MIDI to them, you can copy RealTracks audio as well as the MIDI reel charts to the utility tracks, where you'll then be able to hear and edit the RealTracks audio and view and edit the reel charts MIDI. You can copy just audio from the RealTracks or reel drums to them for further editing. You can copy MIDI to these utility tracks for playback and editing. You can copy just regions of MIDI or audio to them. And you can generate harmonies from audio tracks, including RealTracks, and send those separated harmonies to the utility tracks. So to start, we're going to look at recording audio to utility tracks. This process is very similar to how you could previously record audio to the audio track, but now you can record 16 additional tracks beyond that single audio track. So I have one of the new artist performances loaded, featuring flautist Jeff Kelly and violinist Daniel Lapp, performing the traditional Irish tune Kesh Jig. And I'd like to record my own additional track onto that, just for fun. So I'm going to press the record button. First, I'm going to open the audio settings and look at the audio driver. My interface is listed here. And now here's some important information. My interface supports 24-bit recording, and Bananabox 2021 now supports 24-bit recording, playback, mixing, and rendering. So what I'm about to record here will be in 24-bit audio, and when I play it back afterwards, I'll be hearing 24-bit quality sound, and when I render the final thing down to an audio mix, I will not have lost any of the sound quality from the original recording. And here I'm going to set the track I'll be recording to, and I'll select Utility Track 1. I'll just play a little bit to see what my levels are like in the VU meter. If I needed to adjust levels, that could be done by pressing the Set Recording Levels button, or in my case, I would just set them manually on my interface. But the levels in the VU meter already look pretty good. And now I'll go ahead and record. Now that it's stopped, we can see that Utility Track 1 now appears orange, indicating that it has audio on it. I'll play a little bit back. And now when I'm ready to render a mix, I can save it as a 24-bit file, and the entire process of recording through to rendering has been done in 24-bit.